Hi, is anyone out there? It's me, Katie, and I am doing my first Instagram Live in my pajamas. Anybody awake out there? So, thought we would just do a quick recap of New Hampshire, what it means for the future, Donald Trump's victory there in the New Hampshire primary, Nikki Haley's refusal to drop out of the race. Hi, I'm so glad you guys are here. You can't sleep. I actually am exhausted. I can't sleep. And for some godforsaken reason, I said I would do an Instagram live at 11 o'clock tonight. What is wrong with me? Anyway, I hope this is helpful. I am talking to my good friend, Brian Goldsmith. He is a political brain, unparalleled. And he helped me with my Sarah Palin interview back in the day. Hey, Brian. Hey, Brian. Welcome to Katie at Night. This is our little late night Instagram live, and it's just fun because yes, we'll explain. I love my followers, by the way. They're so great, and look at it. It's like 11:02, and we've got almost 2,000 people joining us. Again, I hope it's helpful. Brian and I used to do a podcast together. Next question, and now Brian's very busy doing a lot of other things. So I do the podcast without him, but I was just singing your praises, Brian. And by the way, speaking of podcasts, you all, I interviewed Kamala Harris last Friday at the White House. And if you want to see that interview before anyone else does, sign up for Wake Up Call. Go to katiecouric.com. It's going to be in our morning newsletter. And then, of course, we're going to push it out as the podcast and also put it on social media, including YouTube, because we did video and audio of that. Anyway, enough of that shameless plug. Brian, let's talk, shall we, honey? All right. Were you surprised that Donald Trump beat Nikki Haley by so much? What is the latest? 54 to 43? Is that right? With 55%?
Like it's headed for kind of marginal double digit. On one level, I'm not surprised because the poll showed a consistent, comfortable Trump victory for, the last couple of weeks. On another level, it's really worrying and disconcerting and sort of shocking, even if it wasn't surprising. Just because, he went out tonight, he did this speech that was very nasty and small and vengeful, and
And he
you
said,
realize,
well, let's for people who might not be glued to cable, like political wonks like you. He said something about Tim Scott, who has endorsed him, who Nikki Haley named as a senator in South Carolina when she was governor, and he said, "Wow, you must something along the lines of you must really hate her."
yeah, you must really hate her. And he said, I mean, I thought this was a very effective, if groveling, recovery from Tim Scott. No, it's just because I really love you. Um, because, even in politics, it's a little strange slash amazing that, a person who only got to the US Senate because another politician appointed him not only failed to endorse that politician, but endorses her opponent, right before a major
We
contest.
should point
So,
out that nobody has won both Iowa and New Hampshire since I guess night. Okay, this is when you can really shine, Brian. Brian knows everything historically about politics, but it hasn't happened since what year, Brian Goldsmith?
well, it's actually not so long ago in 2000.
19. I thought it was well. Okay, everyone's saying 1976 on TV tonight.
No, 2004, John Kerry won Iowa and New Hampshire. And my friend Bob Shrum, who may be watching, who was the strategist behind that amazing political comeback, I can see him like shouting at his phone right now, no, no, Kerry won both in '04. And Al Gore won both, another Shrum
Well,
client, actually.
maybe are they talking about the first Republican to do this?
Yeah, on the Republican side, did Ford win Iowa and New Hampshire? I'd have to double check. That would have been 76. But of course, Ford nearly lost the nomination to Reagan that year. Reagan lost Iowa famously in 80. Anyway, we can go through the whole litany.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a rare political feat to win both. And I don't think anyone's ever lost the nomination, having won the first two contests. So Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. We kind of knew this before Iowa. We really know it now.
Now, is this barring anything that happens with the 91 criminal, and I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying this, the 91 criminal indictments he's facing, could they possibly rain on his parade?
Yeah, it's funny. We talk about the history of these presidential primary contests, and then we're in the parallel universe right now of, oh yeah, and this guy's been hit by 91 felony counts and tried to overturn the last election and inspired a violent insurrection at the Capitol, and it's like there's a point at which the historical precedent stops. So to answer your question, we have seen in some polling that a quarter to a third of Republican primary voters have said that if he's found guilty on any of these counts, that he would lose their support. I'm just pessimistic that any of these trials are even going to happen, let alone resolve themselves between now and November. If you're a defendant and you're, halfway competent, you can delay this stuff. And he has a very long history, a 50-year long history that Maggie Haberman goes into in her excellent book on Trump of playing the like I don't know that she's watching, but like Confidence Man is a good book, but it goes into exactly this, how he's evaded and avoided legal accountability, for literally since the 70s. I mean, he's a master at this.
Well, let's talk about all the people who did vote for Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. I mean, she got a big chunk of moderate voters. And I'm wondering, does this portend troubles ahead for Donald Trump in the general election, whatever happens to him legally?
My big and bold prediction is maybe. And I say maybe because primary results do not always or often portend general election outcomes. I remember a lot of kind of pundits overanalyzing the 2008 primaries and Obama's weakness with Hillary's voters, his persistent weakness with Hillary's voters, to extrapolate and say, well, he's never going to carry them. He's going to have a major problem with Democrats in the general election against McCain. And of course, he didn't at all. Once it became a Democratic versus Republican choice, Democrats came home to him. That said, the Trump situation may be a little different because he won by this fluke, drawing this inside straight in 2016, losing the popular vote by millions of votes, winning just enough in these core battleground states to eke out a victory. And then in every election since, Trump and Trumpism have really suffered with some core voter groups that historically Republicans have done well with: suburbanites, center-right independent, college-educated white people. At the same time, though, you have to say that Trump and Trumpism have made some gains with non-college educated or working class voters who are not just white, but Latino and even some Black men. And that is a very significant problem for Joe Biden as we now look to the general election.
One of the questions I talked to Kamala about, as you know, is the fact that he's down, 20% among young voters, and his support among Latino, isn't it 20 points or something for young voters? And Latino
by more than 20 last time, and now he's tied or up by a few points.
So that's right. So he's lost 20 points with young voters and also with Latino and Black voters, as you mentioned, and they're looking to Kamala to kind of shore up that support for Joe Biden. And that's one of the things we talked about in that interview. Well, Joe Biden, I was watching one of the networks and they announced today, basically, this is the beginning of the campaign. Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. They showed T-shirts that were for sale, saying they were going to beat Donald Trump again, or together we're going to beat Donald Trump again. So do you think they're not really jumping the gun? I mean, is there any way Nikki Haley comes back from this, especially given that he's up 30 points in her home state of South Carolina?
And I would bet a large amount of money that she drops out before she's humiliated in her home state. I mean, when Elizabeth Warren came in third in the Massachusetts Democratic primary 4 years ago, that was a major humiliation for her. And my guess is Haley doesn't want to go through anything like that. No, I mean, barring some health catastrophe, legal catastrophe, asteroid hitting the Earth, this is the choice, as many of us suspected it would be for the last year. Joe Biden's the incumbent. It's virtually impossible to defeat an incumbent president for his party's presidential nomination. And Donald Trump is a quasi-incumbent. He's already been their nominee twice. He's already been elected president once. I mean, there's not a long history in the US of former presidents coming back to run again, but you can only imagine, vice presidents former vice presidents do really well trying to win their party's nomination. So of course, a former president who's redefined the party in so many ways as Trump has would be a dominant figure and would be the heavy front runner for the nomination.
Let's talk before we go about the future. So when are the next contests? Can we just go through the calendar real quickly for people?
Well, the next contest is actually a little weird. It's Nevada. I don't have the exact date in front of me. I think it's in the next week or 10 days. And then about a week or so after that is South Carolina. The reason that people don't talk about Nevada a lot is, as I mentioned, it's kind of a strange circumstance where the state party at Trump's behest kind of divided it into both a primary and a caucus. So it's two different contests, 2 days in a row, both of which seem kind of pre-cooked for Trump. I don't think Haley, if she's still in the race, is even going to compete there. And then Nevada, and then we move, as I say, to South Carolina, and I find it impossible to believe that Haley's going to put herself through being defeated resoundingly in her home state, which is what would happen. I mean, the whole establishment in South Carolina has
Governor Tim Scott,
right,
Lindsey Graham,
yeah.
All of them are lining up behind Trump. I thought she was a pretty popular governor. What happened?
She was a pretty popular governor. She had alienated pieces of the Republican establishment in the state. She was never particularly their candidate. I don't think she was ever great at kind of the Karen feeding of other politicians in the way that some governors are. It struck me that she didn't call Tim Scott for a month after he dropped out of the race. I mean, when I worked for Pete Buttigieg's campaign, we had a rule that the candidate called any candidate who dropped out the same day. I mean, that was just basic blocking and tackling, and it reflected a candidate who also was happy to reach out and wanted to talk to those people. So, I think Trump called him immediately. I think Trump is actually pretty good at reaching out to other politicians so long as they're completely loyal to him. And I think, interestingly, he really loves the zeal of the converted. He loves people who were critical of him at one point in the past, who are now, groveling sycophants now, because it just shows him, his power at kind of flipping people. And the more obsequious, the better.
Before, again, and I know everybody probably wants to go to bed. I want to go to bed, but I guess the number one issue, according to exit polls, was immigration, which I was somewhat surprised about in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
of all places, that immigration would play such a big role in the way people were voting. But the Republican Party has been very effective in weaponizing this issue and blaming Biden for the number of people who are crossing the border. I mean, some might say it's a fair criticism, and I thought it was interesting that while they support more aid to Israel, the same wasn't true of Ukraine.
Right. Ukraine has become a kind of a MAGA issue where, it's against Putin. Putin's for our guy, therefore we're against Ukraine.
So weird.
I defy you to name a single issue where Trump has taken a position in opposition to Vladimir Putin. It's very strange. I don't see a historical precedent for that, hearkening back to the beginning of our conversation. On immigration, that's one of the ways in which Trump has redefined the party. it was always kind of a party that valued strong borders, but it was also a party under Reagan and Bush that welcomed immigrants, that wanted to create a path to citizenship for people who came here, even illegally, that favored protections for dreamers, people who came here as kids through no fault of their own, and that's all been wiped away. It's now a ferociously, anti-immigrant kind of grievance party. And of course, one of America's great strengths is that people from all over the world want to move here. That said, the border is a real problem. I think if President Biden could make a deal where he gets Ukraine and Israel funding in exchange for some tough measures on the border, he recognizes that that would be kind of a win-win-win for him, and he would go for it. I think the big question is, will Republicans in the House in particular, do they want him to have any room?
Right.
Even if he meets them 80% of the way, are they going to agree to that? I think Senate Republicans would. I'm skeptical that House Republicans will, and that's
certainly a certain segment of House Republicans who want much stricter measures and don't want to hand Joe Biden a victory in an issue that has become such a potent weapon for the GOP. If they're playing pure politics, they don't want to solve the problem. They want to use it as a campaign issue.
And then the question is, what does the new speaker do? Does he bow down to Donald Trump? He already talks about, his conversations with Donald Trump on this issue, and a minority of his caucus, or does he allow the full House to vote on this? And it would pass with a comfortable bipartisan majority. But, the part of the awesome power of the speakership is you get to decide what comes to the floor of the Congress. And, you have now two kind of core allies of the United States in Ukraine and Israel who, are counting on our help. And that is being held hostage to a legitimate grievance about the border. But the question is, are they playing politics or do they actually want a solution? And to other Democrats, I think, I forget who said this, but I thought it was a great line, which is, if liberals don't secure the border, then fascists will.
Then what will?
If liberals don't secure the border, then fascists will.
Mm-hmm.
And this part of the argument is, the American people are just not going to tolerate the kind of dysfunction at the border that we've seen.
Yeah. Well, anything else strike you about tonight and exit polls? If you had to sort of give the big picture, and then I'm going to let you go and let everyone go to sleep.
I mean, I would say the coalitions are not surprising. Trump remained really strong with Republicans, with conservatives, with people for whom immigration was the top issue. And Haley performed much better among independents who could participate. Not Democrats, by the way. That was another Trump lie. Democrats would have had to re-register as Republicans or independents back in October in order to participate. But Haley also did well, with people who were pro-choice, people who were more moderate on other issues. But there just weren't enough of them. And her margins among her groups were not nearly as big as Trump's margins among his groups. People were voting, if they were voting for him, they were very enthusiastically for him. If they were voting for her, the plurality were voting against him. So it was really all about Trump yet again.
And a lot of people are, sorry to interrupt, but a lot of people are talking about the enthusiasm gap for the general election. And that's something that is very worrisome for the Biden campaign in terms of the enthusiasm among Trump voters versus Biden voters. Of course, it's early. The campaign has just begun, but that's something people are talking about. Hey, just because I want to be responsive to our viewers and folks who are nice enough to tune in, somebody asked, is Nikki Haley, if she bows out, is she the top vice presidential choice for Donald Trump? I think that's interesting. Is there too much bad blood between those two? Will it hurt her future political, ambitions if she were to do that? And do you think that would ever happen?
The answer to the last question is probably not. I think Trump is hopping mad about her staying in the race.
Yeah, she's
Not
obviously getting under his skin.
right, not kissing the ring like the others who have lost in the primary have. I think it'd be a very smart general election move, honestly, for him. It would make him look bigger, not smaller, to add somebody who appeals to a lot of constituencies that are not for him. I think she,
He doesn't usually go that route though.
right. He usually goes kind of vengeful and personal, and I think he's going to pick someone. I think the lesson that he learned from January 6th is you cannot surround yourself with anyone who is not a lackey or a flunky
Who may disagree or challenge you.
in any way. So Trump too is going to be all about loyalty. It's going to be all about sir, yes, sir, no matter what. And that is not Nikki Haley. There are definitely other candidates who are more than happy to advance their careers by playing that role. And he's going to pick one of them.
Can you name a couple just before I turn in?
I mean, it's a long list in today's Republican Party. He does have this kind of 1950s Queen sense of casting. Like, I got a problem with some women. Maybe I'll pick one of these dames. I got maybe if I pick a black guy, I'll get more black guys. I mean, it's a very kind of, I think, simple and straightforward analysis of, but the reality is most people don't vote for vice president. So what he's really picking is somebody who would be, I wouldn't say his political partner because he would never allow someone to be his co-star, but like maybe a sidekick. Who's his Danny DeVito? And I think it's going to be someone who is out of central casting, to use one of his favorite terms, and who's completely obsequious. And he's going to have many from which to choose, from whom to choose. You're the grammarian.
From many people. I think from whom, from which, I don't know. I'm too tired. But and not to mention if he's reelected, what his cabinet's going to look like. Anyway, let's not go there. It's too late, and the campaign has just begun. It's a long way to November. So, Brian, thank you for doing this. It's only, by the way, Brian is in LA, you guys. It's 8:00, 8:20.
Katie's the one who really worked overtime for you people. I mean, it's 25.
Yeah.
By the way, she says it would be from whom. So
From whom?
yeah, for the record.
Yeah, that's what I was leaning towards, but I didn't want to be wrong. Okay, Brian, I think there is your mic kind of went in and out. Maybe you're in a bad room for Wi-Fi or something.
Okay, here's a question. I'm just holding my phone now. Is that actually better?
Much better.
Oh, so it was the stand for the mic. All right. Well, you're the pro.
Isn't this fascinating, everybody? Aren't you glad you stayed up late?
700 people are watching this. Yeah.
Well, we had much more. And by the way, I saved this and we get people who watch it later.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. I'm going to send it to all my family and friends.
Okay. All right. Brian, thanks a lot. Tell Claire and the kids I said hi.
I will.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
Katie.
Okay. Bye, guys. Bye.